Hello, my name is Drew, and I'm the Aspiring Master, and welcome to the Aspiring Master Presents. This is a show where we talk about the meanings, misunderstandings, and insights about the important words we use and misuse on a daily basis. Really understanding what we're truly meaning when we talk allows us to convey and explain ourselves better to others. This not only allows us clearer communication so we can get what we need quicker and with less stress, but also helps us understand ourselves in more depth than we thought possible. This show is special in that it is a compilation of the best parts of the Aspiring Master Presents for the past year, in celebration of our first season. So sit back and relax and enjoy our best of season 1 show.
I've actually broken this down. I was thinking about it the other day, and I've broken this down, and it's like, so fear is quite literally the body's response to what we perceive as danger. And the response is adrenaline gets pumped, a bunch of endorphins go into your system because adrenaline actually hurts you. So the endorphins go in to make you feel better about everything moving. And you have the fight, flight, or freeze.
And that's the problem. We go into our reptilian response and maybe even our mammalian response, but we don't go into our rational response.
Right.
When it comes to fear, and that is false evidence appearing real, and it's the false evidence part of fear. I think that is maybe part of the biggest discussion, because it's what we ascribe to something that creates the fear. And why do we do that?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm actually going to investigate fear a little bit more before we get into false evidence appearing real, because it is really, really important that we go there. And it's actually almost a long discussion in itself. So I don't want to hit there before I hit a couple of more points. The point that I'm making here is, like, what are we afraid of? What are our base, what I would say base fears? And I came up with only 2 as our root fears. And it's the fear of death being the major one, and the fear of pain being kind of a secondary one. And the reason that I separate those 2 is because it for me, when I think about how my fear structure works, I go, what am I the most afraid of? It's like, initially my fear response is, I'm afraid of dying in some form or another, right? So it's just like, I'm afraid that I'm going to die. The old hindbrain goes, oh my God, you're going to die. It's time to move forward and get this done, or freeze, or whatever it is, however I respond.
So the fear of being socially ostracized would be the fear of the social connection. The death of the social connection, rather.
Yeah, well, basically, the fear that you will be cut off, and you will be cut off from your resources. And if we follow that route down to the root of fear of death, right? We can say,
well, yeah, okay.
Yeah. We can say that, yeah, exactly. That intrinsic connection, that need for connection that we have as people, is so strong that we would fear losing those connections, for fear that we won't get sustained, with all the stuff that we need from that.
Whether physically or emotionally, or whatever. Okay.
Well, but the reason that I say pain too is because pain buys into this. When I look at my fears, I go, okay, fear of death being the root cause, right? Like, of our fear as just mammals, right? We are protecting ourselves from death, right? Now, pain comes before death. And I found that, me personally, one of my major fears is, I'm not so much afraid of death,
but a painful death.
But I'm more afraid of pain than I am of death.
Yeah. Well, and I get that. A lot of people will say, they choose not to do chemo or whatever because the quality of life, that have a short period of pain versus the prolonged period of pain. Just get it over with. Just let me die.
Right.
And of course, if we believe, and I do believe, that there is something more beyond death, that this is just a way station, so to speak, then I don't really have that same. I don't have a fear of death. I have a fear of dying, perhaps.
Well, so one of the things that I found is, if you have, like, rationally, absolutely, I think that rationally we can rationalize pretty much anything. We can say, if you believe in a higher power, or you believe in life after death, or you believe in nothing after death, or however that works, for an individual, that you can say, oh, well, I'm circumventing my fear of death. But remember that our mammalian brain does not identify that way. Like, our lower our lower brain functions only identify fear, danger to person, meaning danger to person leading to death. And so, even though rationally in my mind I can say that I'm not afraid of death, that mammalian part of me is still there, right? That fear is still present in our lives. We just sort of are able to sort of short circuit it to a degree.
I get that. Yeah. Now, hopefully, we are not reptilian. We are not strictly mammalian. We have higher functions as humans than those two real categories. So of course, we are part of them,
Mhm.
especially if we believe in the evolution that we came to ooze, and that we really are reptilian as well. Um, but we have a higher functioning part of us that can supersede, and it's we don't consciously come in contact with that part often enough to override our fears. But it is a tool that's definitely there, and that's called our higher functioning part of our vagus nerve, and just our higher ability to rationalize and know and differentiate.
Right. Well, and I agree with you, because there's certainly fears that I like, what I would consider irrational fears, that I've overcome in my lifetime. A fear of heights, which is a sort of a base fear, really.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like, I'll fall
that's
and
not
die.
necessarily an irrational fear.
Right. Like, exactly. But it can be irrational if that fear of heights is fear of falling from a 6-foot height as opposed to falling from 1,000-foot
Sure.
height. Right. So, when I take a look at, yeah, I've been able to overcome fears in my life, and to switch my thinking around the fear. And it's not necessarily that the fear itself stops. It's that I recognize it as it comes up, and I reprioritize it so that it's not taking over my system. But here's the thing: it's like, when we were talking earlier about social connection, and because it is one of our basic needs, which is social connection, then food, water, and shelter. Because social connection we need in or as babies, because we need to connect with somebody to provide us those wonderful things.
Yeah, yeah.
So when we're talking about social connection and the fear, comes into that fear of public speaking that people so often talk about being one of their major fears. And it was, so what are we afraid of in that? We're afraid of being ostracized on a huge level. Like, because if you're in front of an audience of 100 people, that's being ostracized by 100 people, or being ostracized by one person, can bring up that fear.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah. Because at root of that, if you are up there standing alone in front of a group, or even one-on-one with another person, it's nothing but you and what you have said that someone has rejected.
yeah.
And being rejected, rejected on the premise of who we think we are,
Hmm.
it cuts to the quick.
Well,
And it makes us fearful of losing other people's respect and all the other things.
well, I think that for when I go inside and internally look, it's like, okay, so if I was in that position, what would be what would be my thought process around that? Because when we look at it, it's like, I'm in front of a bunch of people, one, that don't know me, um, and two, that, are probably not going to be in my life, really, realistically, rationally. But when I'm up there and I'm afraid of being ostracized on that level by that many people telling me that I am not good enough, right? Comes
Mhm.
back to my insecurities, absolutely. But what is it that what is my thought process really behind that subconscious thought process? I just go, if these people reject me, that means that everybody may reject me and I won't get any needs met. If I go down to a primal level, which will cause, for me, pain, like that's really painful to say that I'm being disconnected. And so there's that pain that if we go back to our
Yeah,
base
yeah,
functioning
yeah. And if
could
you're
be
gonna go,
lead to death,
if you're
right?
gonna go even further than that, if we get rejected too much, then I might be in pain as I starve to death,
Yeah, exactly.
or as a saber-toothed tiger
Right.
attacks me.
Right. All right.
Yes, yes.
No, I totally get that. So in regards to how we talk about and understand fear, I mean, I think that our thought process, our conscious thought process, really can help us through a lot of this, because we can rationalize a lot of the fear that's going on if we understand it as something that we can utilize in our lives as a flag to say, hey, pay attention here.
Yeah, to pay attention and use the tools that we have through our rational mind.
Mhm.
Simple things like take a deep breath,
Mhm.
change your sponsoring thought, do the reset that we program that Nana and Joe do that I talked about in the love segment. There are things that we can do to mitigate, and most of them quite simple,
Mhm.
except for changing our sponsoring thought. But um, if we get into the habit of noticing and using the tools, the more frequently we do it, the more able we will be to do it successfully on shorter notice and shorter period of time in overcoming. Otherwise, we get out there, we sweat profusely, and we plow on through.
Yep.
So dehumanization, and I went to dictionary.com to get this definition as opposed to Merriam-Webster, and I'll explain that in a second. So in dictionary.com it says dehumanization, to deprive a person or a group of human qualities, personality, or dignity. Now, Merriam-Webster, on the other hand, says to deprive, and then it says in brackets, it has in brackets, a person or thing, right, of human qualities, personality, or dignity.
Right there, the thing is
Yep.
dehumanizing the group, isn't
I
it?
know, right? I mean, it's just like, or
Oh.
it says, it doesn't say, it didn't say thing, it says something. And the problem with something is yeah, we can sometimes humanize inanimate objects. Like take a look at Wilson in Tom Hanks's movie On the Island there. What the hell was that? Castaway, right?
Castaway.
Yeah, we sometimes will humanize something to satisfy our own inner need for connection, right? So I totally get the idea of what they're talking about, but I think that saying something in that statement really kind of dehumanizes in and of itself. So yeah, I totally.
The human group, yeah.
I was like, huh? Okay. This is how we justify atrocities to people or groups of people all the time. And the reason that we do that is because we reduce these people down to objects, and we actually reduce them down to things, as you were saying. And we reduce them down to things, and it's easy to discard things out of our lives. Like, it's so much easier to throw something away.
It's easy to use and abuse things.
Yes. And if they are not human, if they are not as I am, in our minds, it is very, very, very easy to just like to treat them very badly.
And it's a way of raising us up.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we're taking a look at healthy marriages, because I believe that both your marriage and the marriage between Talia and I are way more healthy relationships. I can't say there's no such thing as perfect in this field, because any relationship with another person is never going to work out absolutely great. Nobody ever fights, all of that stuff.
The idea of a perfect marriage is a myth. There's no such thing as a perfect marriage.
I will agree on that one.
Well, thank you for your verdict.
Kind of relevant to what you're talking about. Of course, males and females get the short stick when it comes to allowed for grieving and depression. Mm-hmm. So just substituting your mind, if as a young man, how might your life have been different if, when you were a young woman, the first time you felt feelings of depression, an older woman had come to sit with you? If she had come to sit with you as someone had come to sit with her in the first time she had feelings of depression, to simply sit quietly, perhaps wordlessly, to sit with you during your dark time. And how might your life have been different if the woman had accepted your feelings of depression, had accepted them so completely and fully that you began to feel safe with them? If there had been no judgment and no questioning, no attempt to make you smile, to betray your feelings, to deny your darkness. If the woman had simply sat in silence with you, with your pain, and in the darkest moments had been able to reflect it to you, to reflect to you your pain, to witness, attend, and by her quiet respect for it to help you learn to respect it, your own pain and depression, to witness, attend, and respect your depression, and to see that just as the woman had faith in it, you also might have a glimmer of faith that there was meaning and truth in your darkness. Mm-hmm. How might your life be different?
Well, if some guy sat down and did that for me, I was tempted to make a joke out of it. Out of nowhere, this guy, how would it change my life? You know what? I can't tell you how it could have, because it's being the person that I am today, and really absolutely liking and loving the person that I am today. I don't know whether or not that would have bypassed a number of the things that I needed to go through to get here.
Well, of course, there is that.
Right.
But there's also the fact that if someone had been there in that way for you, for me, it might have put a different perspective on the things that I was to experience, and I might have come to the place of loving and understanding sooner.
Well, I agree. I think that what she's saying in that whole statement is that if we had compassion, right, which is, again, not sympathy but compassion, and we accepted, understood, and reflected that back to each other, without trying to make it less uncomfortable for ourselves, right? Yeah. Like me being the person sitting with you.
I think the crux of it for me is the very last statement, that I would have known that no matter what I was feeling, no matter what I was experiencing, there was meaning in it.
Oh, and it was acceptable.
And it was acceptable.
Yeah, yeah.
And that could have taken me in a whole different trajectory. I mean, I love the trajectory my life has taken, but it might have taken me to a trajectory of really understanding oneness and really understanding that everything is connected, and really may have amplified who I was to become, evolutionary of my soul, in a much different more powerful
Well, and
way.
I love how everything begets everything else. I mean, you and I have to do another show on selfishness because that's a really in-depth subject of really understanding what that is because we use that word as a swear word quite often. Um, and oh, you're selfish, right? And it sort of it ties in with the expectation of needing a return for stuff.
Or the
Um,
expectation of how someone is supposed to act and react. Yeah.
right. And I don't want to give too much away on that episode because I could just branch off into that right
Give them
now.
the choice, say, so and so will be sad if you don't, but it's also okay if you don't, and give them the choice. Tell them, explain what the repercussions of not sharing might be,
Hmm.
if there are, and that kind of thing. Instead of share,
Right.
do it. You're
Well,
a bad person. You're a bad person if you don't.
I
Because sharing has always got to be a personal yes choice for it to have any real positive energy attached to it. That kind of comes under the category of constructive criticism too. I know someone who, if I tell them, just tell them just straightforward, this is something I don't like, or this is something that you do when you do it, it bothers me. It bothers that person tremendously. And I admit I don't really understand it because most of the time, if someone had said exactly that same type of thing to me, I go, oh, okay, I didn't notice that. Thank you. So I admit I don't fully understand why people get hurt from telling simple truths.
Right.
These aren't mega things,
like Drew doesn't know how to dance when I always thought I did.
I didn't tell you that, did I?
No. I'm talking about it. That would be one of those truths that we're talking about, right?
Tell you to your face you're a horrible person because you do X, Y, and Z. I
Right.
would never, of course, do that.
Well, the truth is that's again a perception of what horrible is, right?
Yeah.
It's like I don't agree with you is one thing, but if I were to jump to that conclusion of like say Therese, you're a horrible person because now although that may be truthful about the way that I feel, but the feeling itself could be based on a bunch of lies, right? So
yeah, but that actually brings me to another. It's still rooted in not willing to accept fully the consequences of speaking the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But I get why some people would lie if lying would bring harm to you or your family or
Mm-hmm.
another. I get that, but then again, there are people we call martyrs who stood firm in their truth about who they are and what they believe and willing to die for it.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is supposed to be based on some spirituality, I'm assuming, if we truly believe that there is more beyond this life, then and we keep not standing in our truth no matter what, then we are lying about what we believe. That's a lie to ourselves because
right.
If we believe that this life is just a step to next, then this life can end on a truth with no second thought about it. What do you consider to be the basis of a good marriage?
Okay, well, again, that good is subjective, right? So the basis of how about the basis of a workable marriage?
Okay, we get it. You're smart and you're trying not to talk down to people. But you know what? Answer the damn questions.
Yeah, if that was not the place to find words.
This is a good marriage. Okay.
You didn't say at the beginning that I'm your ex-work wife, so
exactly. My ex-work wife.
The work wives. Awesome. I'm gonna jump in here. because, you know, Drew likes to tell people that our marriage is great, it's wonderful, it's blah, 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 blah. It's not perfect by any means. But one thing we do is communicate. We talk and we talk and we talk about big stuff. We talk about little stuff. I can be in a bad mood and I can have some random thought come into my head and I can say, hey, honey, blah, 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 blah. And he'll kind of, huh, okay. Or he'll, oh, well, what about this? Have you thought about that? And that'll lead to a 3 to 4 hour conversation about, I don't know, camera movements in movies or something like that. But we talk about everything. We go on long drives to talk about everything.
You know, I get that. Everyone at the end of the Clinton administration was really sure that Hillary was going to divorce Bill.
Yeah.
and she wrote her book, and I read it, and she addressed the Monica Lewinsky scandal with about this much. But what she said about their marriage, she said, I'm not going to talk about our marriage. She said, but I will tell you this, the conversation just never ends. Meaning we have something in common. We always have something to talk about. We're not bored with each other. We're not, which also, subtext to me says, we talked this out. We talked the problems in our marriage out, and we came to an agreement on what our marriage looks like. And I think that's one of the problems we have, is that we expect a marriage, every marriage, to look a certain way. It's kind of the same as the word try. I heard Dr. Michael Beckwith say one time, he never uses the word try anymore, because trying is, and hoping is also allowing for uncertainty, allowing for the fact that it may fail or not be there. You're hoping, but you're not knowing. And it's a very different vibration out into the universe. You're not trying, you're doing. You may not have succeeded in everything that you wish to accomplish, but you have done something. Mm-hmm. No, and that's not failure. Hoping and not getting it because you had a certain expectation rather than a preference of how something's going to turn out is setting yourself up for failure and misery and all the other things that go along with it.
Well, one of the things that I run into most around the idea of hope is, and I run into it in religious people are really, really hyped on hope, and I'm not dissing religious people. I'm just saying, when we take a look at, when we tear down what hope really is, we take a look at something that it can be very, very unrealistic. It's like, I hope, I tell you, if you want to really look at it, I can say I hope anything. Just fill in the blank. I hope I do this right and I become a multimillionaire from doing this show. I hope that
I hope that I lose 40 pounds and I'm a svelte and I'm hired to be a model. And,
Yeah, exactly. It's like that. I can say that I hope to do those things, but I also know, just being an enlightened guy, I guess, that hoping does nothing.
It also, just like faith, because there's faith, hope, and knowing for me. Mm-hmm. Faith and hope both put the fulfillment, your fulfillment of anything, but your sense of fulfillment squarely outside of yourself, mm-hmm. instead of inside of yourself. If something out there happens, then I am fulfilled. Something outside of me is going to do this for me. It puts control of your life outside of yourself.
in the way I see it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. What this is something that I recently discovered that fits right into what we're talking about, fits right into a lot of the definitions that I'm going to go into. And it's our needs as human beings. Now, up until this point, I have thought that we only had three basic needs, and that's food, water, and shelter. And that was basically it. But it actually turns out that we have a fourth need, which is actually the primary need as human beings. And Matthew Lieberman and his wife have done some research, and he came out, I think, in 2013 or 2015 with this data saying we've been mixing it up. We've got our needs sort of wrong. We've been thinking, food, water, shelter, and those are our needs. And then we have some other needs stacked on top of it. Whereas this need is so primal, we are wired that way. Like biologically, if we are accepted socially, whether that's just by one person or by many people, if we are accepted socially, it triggers pleasure centers in our brain. If we are rejected socially, it absolutely triggers pain in our brain. And so when we're talking about that emotional pain that we've all felt, of course it is a physical sensation for us. So now he says in babies, because we rely on somebody else for our food, water, and shelter, this is our main driving need. This is why we cry. This is why we, do all the things that we do as children to get our needs met, because we are connected to somebody or a couple of somebodies to begin with. And then as we grow, this social need takes in, friendships and other acquaintanceships that we go, and is sort of a keystone point to all that we do. So I wanted to sort of bring that up. What are your thoughts?
Well, I recently came across a couple of people who live in Japan, and they have, after the tsunami in 2000, what is that, 8 now? Anyway, they went around trying to help people. They are both psychologists, and the methods that they found that seemed to help, ultimately the feedback that they got from it was that they didn't feel safe doing it on their own. So they developed their own theory based on Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory. Mm-hmm. And it is exactly what you're talking about. PTSD and a lot of the stresses and stuff in our lives are the result of not paying attention to our need for social connection. And part of that was because we had basic survival instinct mentality that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And we knew about the reptilian response. We knew about a lot of the responses, but what scientists, and I'm reading some of the same things, but scientists are discovering now is that there is a pathway through the vagus nerve that can be opened and activated by certain physical machinations, if you will, movements and stuff, that helps us reconnect socially. And our social interaction is key to who we are as a humanity now, and our survival, even our mental survival and our physical survival. So I agree completely that our social needs are what are being neglected in this world of individuality now. We're not recognizing that we're all connected, that we really are all one, individuated. Mm-hmm. To have the further experience.
When we're talking about the whole need thing and how we sort of got on the track of we need things, or we need this to be happy, or we need this to be happy. And again, we describe things in the basis of need. Instead of I desire these things because they make me feel a certain way, we don't have that thought process. All we say is, I need that. We become addicted to I guess maybe we're addicted to happiness to a great degree, is that then from there, it's really easy to make something a need, right? If you say, I have to be happy because it fills me, then I need these things in order to be this.
In truth, the law of attraction says that you get what your strongest thought is what you will attract. So when you want and you need, that strong energy of want and need gives you more want and need.
Right.
Because that's what your energy is. It doesn't give you what you think you are desiring. It gives you more want and need. So if you change your perspective and change it to, I have a preference for something, I have a desire for something, with no requirement for how that thing gets fulfilled, you are more likely to get that very thing that you think you need. But when you change your energy to preference and desire, you have a better chance of receiving it. Of course, it might not look what you think it's going to look like, but it'll be there.
When we're talking about selfishness, we can't talk about selfishness without talking about selflessness. Oh, having no concern for self or unselfish, right? That's what selfless says in the dictionary. Now, there's a whole bunch to unpack there, because if selflessness is the opposite of selfishness, if you're and we were talking about women and the stereotypes, women are supposed to be what?
Selfless.
Selfless, right? They're not supposed to have a self, really.
Yeah.
It's all about their family. It's all about their husband.
We get wrapped up in the stereotypes again. We're supposed to be, our self is supposed to be identified with being a mother, being a wife, being, in fact, we moved a lot. And when I moved to Corpus Christi, I actually went to a welcome to our city little women's luncheon. And we were asked to stand up and introduce ourselves. And all the women before me talked about, hi, I'm so-and-so, and my husband does, and my children, and da-da-da-da-da-da. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there going, when my turn came, I said, hello, my name is Therese Wilson. I have a husband. I have some children. Now let me tell you about me.
Yeah.
I never got invited back.
Oh, no, I'm sure you didn't. It may be that we're looking for agreement of what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, you don't care.
We want someone to be on our side. Yes. Right. Always.
But care is, what, strictly speaking, whether it's worry or whether it's care for, is not really an emotion that we need to, it doesn't need to happen, but we use it in such a way that, I like feeling cared for. So when I say that statement, it's like, I like feeling cared for. I like feeling somebody thinks that I matter, right? But what do we have that's connected to that? Right? What is that emotion that we need that?
Well, there you go, right there. Need, of course. Yeah. And the ones we've spoken of, fear. And fear is we have the lack of something in this situation. And of course, bottom line, we're looking for something outside of ourselves to love us. These basic needs that we have, the food, water, shelter, have been weaponized as well.
Mm-hmm.
We we deny certain groups of people these needs. We deny them the income to get these needs based on color, based on gender,
Well,
based on
IQ,
we
even.
weaponize what we truly need.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was the same for me and Drew. I mean, he was involved in personal growth a lot sooner than I was. And in prepping for today, I actually went back through all my old journals, and it was almost exactly 7 years ago that I started reading Bradshaw and Neil Donald Walsh and all the stuff and the notes I took and on the relationships. And it, at the same time, it seems forever ago, and it also seems like yesterday. But when I think about where I was before, part of me is like, ah, damn, I should have just done it sooner, because it gave me so much more perspective, not just on our relationship and Drew in particular, but also other people around you. And I've told people who are, interested in starting, looking at personal growth, do it with both eyes open, because when the other people around you aren't into it, you see what they do, you see the fallacies of all your relationships with other people, and it sucks for a while because you realize how superficial a lot of our general relationships are, and it can be disconcerting. I know I actually stopped reading it for a couple years and then went back to it, because it just, if you dwell on those feelings for so long, you just get so depressed, like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with people,
And then you do what's wrong with me,
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's giving you an outlet. Anger has a place.
Okay.
Because it does make you aware, just like fear does, of something that's missing in that moment. Of course, then you talk about going back to the root causes. Of course, it always means that you're replacing anger with the love of something or of yourself or someone, or in general spiritual love that you're lacking in that moment.
Well, let's actually even go down further than this, because we can actually talk back up to this space. But anger, in as best as I can figure it, is basically an expression of fear. Now, fear, we have the fight or flight, right? And anger would be, in my estimation, the fight response of fear.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. In your vagus nerve, in polyvagal theory, your vagus nerve is in the fight or flight. It's in your mammalian response. It's not in your reptilian response. It's in a higher response, but you're not into your cognitive brain that understands that what you really need is connection to replace all of that.
Right. So now that, like, I mean, when we look at it, and somebody would ask, and somebody has asked me lots of times before about, he says, okay, well, how can you say that when you're angry you're afraid? And I say, well, okay, well, let's take a look at just what I said just before this, which is anger is I'm not getting what I want. So what's the fear? The fear is I'm not going to get what I want, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that
Well,
fear,
and I would even say the fear is I will be less than in some way if I don't get what I want. Because we value ourselves in certain ways, either exteriorly or interiorly, and we're not getting something that defines us and fills us in some way.
We've talked about responsibility, and I think that there's two versions of responsibility. When I say that we as people can't avoid responsibility because by our actions we enter into the contract that I was talking about, whether we realize it consciously or not. And here's the thing, is we try and avoid responsibility because we don't want to think that we have any part in the consequence. Okay. And that's the part that I want to get, drive home with people is, yes, we all have a part in the eventual outcome
of whatever choices we make. And that is really responsibility. And you can't avoid it, because no matter what you do, like I said, when I get in the car, I make a contract that I am going to navigate through all of the crap out there.
Responsibly.
Yeah, well, but it's I've made a contract in doing that, and also accepting and understanding that there could be adverse consequences
Yeah.
in my actions. And that's not to say, and here's the difference, that when we're talking about legalities, and when we're talking about something that happens, like a drunk driver hits you, when I say who's responsible, I said both of you are responsible, right? You're responsible for taking the risks of getting in your car at 4 a.m. with the possibility of drunk drivers out there, which are very low, right? We take those risks every day, and most of the time we get away with not ever running into that, because the percentages of that actual thing happening are very low, but we still accept the responsibility of the possibility of those things happening. The drunk driver, on the other hand, is responsible for his actions in this case, which is, I've chosen to go to a bar, right? I've chosen to drink, knowing that drinking, and we know this, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, but it's been drilled into us since we were kids, that drinking impairs us, knowing that it impairs us.
Don't drink and drive. It's
Yeah.
all over the signs.
Exactly. Well, knowing that it impairs us, and knowing that we can get to a point where it impairs us so much that we think we can still do the things that we didn't do before, and getting in that car, starting that engine, driving down that road, and colliding. Well, that's his responsibility, right? He is responsible for all of his choices that came to this collision. Now, when I say that, I say by being able to consciously do this, right? Most of these people are not conscious of anything that they're doing, right? They don't understand that the choices that they make now they're skirting those disastrous conflicts that come later co-creatively, like you were saying.
Yeah,
right?
they're skirting the not just the physical consequences, but the emotional consequences.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we don't think emotional consequences until they happen, right?
Yeah, and not just to you, to your girlfriend who
Yes.
have to see your bloody body, dead or alive. You haven't
Yeah.
said. To to the bartender even who served him, to all the different things.
Yeah.
Which leads me back to a little bit of the spiritual discussion, because I remember being very touched, and we've seen different examples of this, but after the Oklahoma City bombing, and at Timothy McVeigh's trial, and then at his execution, I believe, because he was executed.
Yeah.
One of the fathers of someone who died there was out there prominently saying no death penalty. No death penalty. And he had consciously forgiven McVeigh for killing his daughter, that death and killing was wrong, no matter what the situation, that the consequence of being so damaged that he would feel that doing this act was right, was in and of itself a punishment, that he had to live with all of these things going on inside of him, and that he forgave him very publicly. So the consequence, and I was talking about in another context, but the consequence of evil might just be, or the consequence of something we're responsible for in this context might just be setting ourselves up for a different understanding of life and forgiveness and this oneness that I've referred to. It might be the consequence of a loving action instead of a retaliatory action or a legal action or a guilt action or,
So, it's sort of, actually, if you really want to look at how we do the show, right?
we have to. I don't have it scripted, right? The only thing that I really have scripted is that I look up the words, and we start our conversation from there. I don't have any points written down, questions that I'm asking you, anything like that, because truthfully, I don't want any expectations of where we go on this show.
No, I'm in agreement with that. You usually give me the word a day or two before, and of course I know you're going to go to Merriam-Webster, but I avoid it.
Mhm.
A couple thoughts might pop into my mind, but I also don't want to have any expectation
Mhm.
of where the discussion is going, because I want it to be as though I want other people to see that this really is a discussion among friends who mostly think alike, who mostly understand one another, but we are free to disagree.
Mhm.
And we are just sharing our ideas and thoughts about things. And those thoughts might be a little bit different than what they may have thought of on occasion, or what they might get is that feeling of, well, it's nice to see someone agrees with me. Because
Mhm.
a lot of times I know in my life, the way I think about things, sometimes it's hard to find people who agree with me.
Mhm.
You know, different people in my life, I love them dearly, but they don't think the same as I do when it comes to some of these words.
Mhm. Well, I mean, and I run into that in my life as well. So, I mean, this is on some levels, the show for me is just a romp and fundum, right? As well as being giving on the level of like we're sharing our information and knowledge,
Yeah.
you know, but it's also an incredible learning experience for me because you have a way of viewing things that I might not have thought of. I'm certainly not omnipotent in my thinking ability, right? Although some people might say that I come across that way.
Sometimes, not excuse me. Sometimes the things I think that are a little different than others is it's just because I'm 68 years old.
Oh yeah.
A little more experience in real life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, and two, you know, like I mean, yeah, I'm 51. I'm 51. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm 51. At 51, there are things that I've experienced that you would never have had any experience on, and
By
things that
virtue of male and female,
yeah,
and that's the level of expectation.
Yeah.
Even though we are all so different, we expect men to understand women and women to understand men and men to behave as women expect you to and all these other things.
Well, this brings us into the next phase of talking about expectation.
Okay.
Isn't that awesome?
Awesome.
It's sort of like we scripted this.
Yay. Spiritual activist? Where'd you come up with that one?
I don't know. I pulled it out of my ass, really. Are you talking about the intro that I do on the show?
No, the title under me. You call me a spiritual
Oh, no,
activist.
that Talia did it. No, Talia was talking about, I was like, what do we put under there? And I'm just like, spiritual activist. That sounds really cool. That sounds exactly like her. She sounds like she's an activist and she's spiritual. I mean, it's spiritual activist. It's something we totally just pulled out of our ass. And but it sounded really expert.
But that takes us to another show, being honest with ourselves.
Well, I mean that's all the shows that we're doing about, right? Is trying to get down to that space where we can be honest with ourselves.
Ourselves, yeah.
And see, because it's the awareness of it is step number one, to be aware that it is even possible that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Right.
I find myself lately more than ever when I do lay down at night, I stop and think, okay, you were in XYZ situation, you were pretty cool, well, how were you really feeling? Are you lying to yourself saying that you were okay with what was happening? I'm finding myself actually doing that kind of self examination at the end of the day, more and more.
Yeah.
And it really does help the next day, and or the next time a situation arises, because I'm pretty
You could,
honest with
you've
myself
already,
about how I'm feeling.
yeah, you've already thought about it, and so you can go back and you go, oh yeah, right, that was the
Yeah,
conclusion I came.
and that's where I blew it. That's where that's where, in fact, a lot of times that's the moment I lied to myself.
Mhm.
Right there, about how I was feeling. I buried it, or I didn't bury it, and
Well,
we talk
it,
about communication all the time.
right,
We forget we have to communicate with ourselves.
selves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know whether I told you this story. There's a couple that come to mind in regards to caring, because Talia said to me, like time and time again, well, you don't care, right? I mean, she wants me in a certain emotional state or emotional connectivity that I'm not in at the time, and I totally get that. But I come back to her and I said, I obviously do, because I'm here, right? I'm
Yeah.
here with you. And that's not really what you're asking, if I care or not.
And I think in a situation you're describing, of course, it's very superficial description, but that's also a little bit of the guilt card being played.
Mhm.
You don't care,
Yeah. Well,
you
yeah.
feel guilty and horrible for nothing.
Yeah, you should feel guilty and horrible. And I want you to feel as I'm feeling. I mean, it's sort of like that attraction to, if I'm angry, I want you to be angry.
Yeah.
Now I have to say that in this, as a confession, I understand the desire to. I think that Don Miguel Ruiz, who did the Four Agreements, the book The Four Agreements, he talks about emotional poison and how we like to infect other people with it so that we feel better. So I like his definition of how that works, because certainly I see it every day, how a bad mood will try and get somebody else in a bad mood. It's like, okay, wait a minute. What do you mean you could care less?
Well, if that statement, I could care less, is the wrong one.
Yeah, I could care more.
I couldn't care.
I couldn't care less. Yeah, you're right, and that's why I switch it. I could care more, but I don't. But when you offend somebody or anything like that, and then they make an untrue statement to protect themselves, and we use lies to protect ourselves. Absolutely. I mean, if somebody was had a gun to my head and said, "I'm going to shoot you unless you think I'm a really good person," I'm going to lie through my teeth, man. That I'm protecting myself, and I think that's what it comes down to. Is when we lie, we're actually protecting ourselves, whether it's from pain, from anger, from displeasure, right?
Of course, yeah. We don't have to accept whatever that consequence is.
Right.